Reading from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24, verses 13 and 35. Now, on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him.
And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. And then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" And he asked them, "What things?"
They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel."
Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him.
Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures.
As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening. The day is now nearly over." So he went in and stayed with them. And while he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. And then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight.
They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together.
They were saying, "The Lord has risen, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road, and how he had been known to them in the breaking of the bread. Holy wisdom, holy word. Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
Well, good morning. If we haven't met before, my name's Spencer. Even if we have met, my name's still Spencer. And well, it's the last week of this school year, and I'm sure it's not how any of us pictured it, right? It would have been normal for us to be in Santee Chapel this morning, hugs all around, celebration of spring in every step, pushing through this crushing weight of the workload that we're all feeling in this final week. And professors, I know you can relate to. But we would be asking each other how many assignments we still have left before summer or graduation. My answer, too many. Let me graduate already. But this isn't the reality today. Instead, we're left figuring out this new normal. And I think this passage from Luke this morning is just so applicable to such a time as this. So picture this scene of the very first Easter with me, that Luke tells us about this morning. Can you feel it? These two travelers had been in Jerusalem for Passover and knew all about how Jesus had been crucified on a cross and placed in a tomb, but wasn't there that morning. No one had seen him. No one knew where he was or what had happened to him in those 3 days in the grave. Everyone was still in shock, still processing the trauma that was the cross just 3 days before. The air in Jerusalem was still very heavy with the oppressive injustice they had witnessed. This was a time of intense grief and mourning, and now confusion. Time had slowed down, schedules had been disrupted, lives had been changed forever. Does this sound familiar? I think it does to my dog if you hear him barking. On that first Easter day, I picture these two just like, well, what do we do now? They needed to get out of Jerusalem. They might have been heading home. They might have been running to just get away from it all. They may have just wanted to return to normal. I picture these two walking along slowly on the road, heads down, just deflated, forlorn. These two travelers on the road to Emmaus just wanted to get back to some resemblance of normal. But something was off. Something was even off about this stranger on the road with them. How did he not know about Jesus? He must have been living under a rock, or perhaps behind a stone. When this stranger asked what they were discussing as they walked along, we read that these two stood still, looking sad. They're stopped in their tracks, already feeling defeated. They've now encountered someone who apparently doesn't know why they're sad and wants them to relive this agony over again by explaining it to them. They're not only feeling the aftermath of Jesus' public murder, but they're disappointed. This guy was supposed to be the Messiah. They told the stranger they had hoped that Jesus was the one to redeem Israel. Those two words are just so crushing, aren't they? They had hoped, but no longer. Can you hear the disappointment? Maybe you can relate. We could probably all think of a time where disappointment, defeat, depression just felt like this weight. I can admit that sometimes I can really get into a funk where I just don't want to do anything. I just want the moment to pass, the day to be over. Maybe these two just wanted the day to pass and things to get back to normal. Does this sound familiar? Now, we don't really know much about Emmaus, the town that they were heading to, but we don't need to know about Emmaus to know why they were leaving Jerusalem. They were getting away from the grief, the disappointment, the confusion. I think we all have an Emmaus, don't we? A place you go or something you do when you just need to get away from it all. I'll ask us this morning, what is your Emmaus? Emmaus need not be a physical place, and for us right now, it might not be. Your Emmaus may not look like it did 2 months ago. Maybe it was the movie theater, the mall, a bar, a friend's house, Starbucks, even church. Maybe now it's Facebook, taking a walk, playing a game, calling a friend, Zooming. Anyone else watch way more Netflix now than you did before? These two were going to their Emmaus, their escape. And on the way, something about this stranger that they met is just too interesting to pass up. So when they got to where they were going, these two travelers invited the stranger inside for the evening. And here, in this moment of finally getting to a place where they could relax, sit down, kick off their sandals, a place where they could process the trauma and hopefully just get back to normal life. It is here their eyes were opened to Jesus, opened to the reality that life would never be the same, opened to a new normal. Jesus, who was the guest, became the host. He took bread, he blessed it and broke it and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened and they recognized him. These two Debbie Downers just had their worlds turned upside down. The stories they had heard about Jesus being alive were actually true. The words of this stranger as they walked along the road were all true. They encountered Jesus in the breaking of the bread. And then in that moment, they realized that Jesus had been with them in their lowest moment, in their escape, in their Emmaus. From now on, there's no longer an option to return to normal as they had known it. Now, they were thrust into a new reality that was so earth-shaking, it could not help but shake them to their core. So groundbreaking, it could not help but turn them inside out. So life-changing that they would never be the same. They found themselves in a new normal. Like these two, looking for a way to get away from it all, we often find ourselves on our way to our own Emmauses. And we need Emmauses. We need space to grieve. We need time away to heal. We need companions to walk with us on that journey. And just as Jesus met them in their moment of grief and disappointment, he meets us too. Never once have we been left to walk this path alone. Our eyes may be too cloudy to see him sometimes, but Jesus has come with us into those places, and he walks with us even now. Friends, we are in a great moment of change, and some things will not be the same. Some great things will be lost, and some new and wonderful things will be gained. The first thing these two did in their new normal, they shared their experience. Their plans that night were no longer important. They left and they ran the 7 miles back to Jerusalem in the middle of the night. They somehow found the group of disciples and out of breath, exhausted, they told them about their encounter with the risen Jesus. An encounter with Jesus changes everything. An encounter with Jesus necessitates a new normal. So as we navigate our new normal, may our eyes also be opened to see what is important and leave behind those things that are no longer necessary. We may have many unknowns ahead of us, but may we forge ahead, defined not by the old normal, the old status quo, but by a new normal in which injustices are shattered, binaries obliterated, oppressions liberated, and the love that we have encountered shared with all those who need it. Thank you.